The 10th edition Codex for the Tau Empire has arrived. It is here at last, the update we have been waiting for. It adds a whole bunch of new things and takes away a few things at the same time. What do we think? Well, let's find out. Well, it is that day at last. The new Tau Codex for 10th edition 40k is here. This is a brand new codex with a bunch of new data sheets, a bunch of new rules, a bunch of different ways to play your army, a little bit of extra lore, and gotta say, it's quite pretty. The collector's edition with the Kroot box set is beautiful. Thank you, GW, for sending it to us. It was a pleasure to build and put together the Kroot. I gotta say, overall, I'm excited for this new codex. I like it. I think there's some really cool, new, juicy things to do in it. There are a few sad things in the codex, which we'll get to in a minute, but there's lots of things to rejoice for and be excited for this fifth sphere expansion of the greater good. And a quick shout out to one of our sponsors, Baron of Dice. Baron of Dice provides all of our dice, all of our play on dice are made by them, and you can find amazing dice for the greater good, for other factions, for other game systems, and really have a unique presence on the battlefield. In fact, they even have a new anniversary dice set that we are releasing this year. It should be out now. You can find them on Baron of Dice. This is our 5-year anniversary. If you didn't know, that's really exciting that we managed to get to 5-year, but you can find these special anniversary dice. You could buy them at Baron of Dice, or if you're traveling to Adepticon, come say hi, meet us, or find the Baron of Dice booth there, and you can buy them at Adepticon. If you're a new watcher to this channel, welcome here. My name is Nicholas. We do amazing battle reports, but we also like to dive into the hobby and gameplay as well. I'm here to give you my reaction to the new Tau Codex, tell you what I think, and give you a few thoughts along the way of how I'm going to use it. This is by no means an exhaustive review because that would take forever and I value your time. If you're new to the Tau, you need to know that the Tau are a newish race to the 40k universe. They're young, a little bit naive about the horrors of the universe, but they're there to spread the greater good and bring unity and greatness for all. They're stylized by battlesuits and mechs, high-tech, long-range weaponry, high-powered shots, and of course their auxiliary. Many alien races join the Tau, and in this 10th edition codex, there's a real emphasis on that, specifically the Kroot. The Kroot have been a little side note for most of Tau history for this game, but they received such a glow up in this edition. Not only is there a whole bunch of new Kroot data sheets, but whole new detachments, so you can run an all Kroot army. And it is a lot of fun. There's some neat tricks to do for it. Of course, for this edition, they have released a new box set, which comes with the collector's edition of the Codex, and unfortunately, this is the only way you can get the Codex for the first bit until they release it down the road. If the Dark Angels Codex is anything to go by, it's roughly about 4 to 5 weeks before they release the Codex separately. So the only way to get it at first is with the box set. Now the box set is cool. The new Kroot models, which all there is Kroot in here, and the cards and the codex, they're very cool. The new sculpts are excellent. They go together really nice, and the new abilities are fun. But sadly, this is the only place you're gonna find it for a while. Before we go into what I really love about this new codex and some of the highlights, the updates that you might see, I first got to caveat some sad news. Anva is truly dead. Anchi is gone, lost to the echoes of eternity, and the Crisis Suit Commander is no more. Not only that, but Longstrike, not Longstrike, is gone. All those characters are just not present in the Codex. What this means is they are now legend. You can still play them with your friends, of course, if you have the miniatures. You can still use the old rules from the old sheets if you want to. Nothing's stopping you, but if you're playing the current rules, if you are playing events, you won't be able to use them. And that's sad. Anva, I never really used. He was the Space Pope, basically a ethereal character. He had some interesting rules. They were kind of wonky. I never really used them. I had the model. I was about to paint him. Now I don't know if I'll get to him. Anchi, I loved. It was basically a melee ethereal with a cool weapon. It had some cool rules to be able to influence that. But Longstrike hurts. These are characters, especially on Shi and on Va, that have been with this codex since the very beginning of the codex. It's sad to see them go. It's like the end of an era. Maybe they'll come up with new ethereal characters to go in. You can still use the models as stand-in for just a generic ethereal, but it looks like those named characters are just gone. Longstrike hurts too. I love bringing Longstrike. It's basically extra hammerhead character for extra cool shots. Predictably, we've also lost the datasheet for the tactical drones. It was an odd thing there, and I don't think anybody would ever take them anyways, but that's gone as well. But what we've gained is some really, really cool stuff. The army special rule, the marker lights and for the greater good ability is still present. It's still exactly the way it was before. They did word it a little better, and they rewrote the wording and provided some handy examples, so it's a little bit more clear, but it still is basically choose 2 units, they work in pairs, one supports the other one gets +1 to hit ballistic skill for whatever it targets. It's a very powerful ability at times, but it does mean that it means your shooting phase can get quite complicated as you kind of figure out which units to pair with which. It's an interesting ability. I've gotten used to it. I didn't initially love it, but I've gotten used to it, and it can be quite powerful. I was hoping they'd get rid of the -1 to ballistic skill for shooting at not the optimal target, because there's a lot of units in the Tau Codex that have multiple weapons that want to split fire, but it's still there. So we got to get used to it. The 4 detachments in there are really, really cool. First of all, the Kayun detachment, which is what we had in the index, is not the exact same. Most of the codexes that have come out so far have kept the index detachment exactly the same. The general detachment bonus that you get, still the same. You still get sustained hits on turn 3, 4, 5 like that, but all of the stratagems, almost all the stratagems are different, which is very interesting. They've given a couple of those stratagems to some of the other detachments. Some of the new stratagems, like Wall of Mirrors, which allows you to take a stealth suit, put it in reserves, and bring it in later, can be very interesting, especially for the Kayun strategy, the patient hunter, waiting until the end of the game to get your kills in and score your points. It really is an interesting style of gameplay, but it's not my style of gameplay. And I have been forced to use Kayun for this entire edition so far, and I have been waiting patiently, well, not so patiently, for the other detachments, specifically Mont'ka, the art of the overwhelming force, the philosophy that if you hit your enemy hard enough at very first chance, they can't hit you back. The Mont'ka detachment ability is very similar to the Kayun detachment ability, but instead of getting bonuses in the later half of the game, you get bonuses in the first half of the game. And like many people suspected, lethal hits. Lethal hits 1 for the first 3 turns of the game, very powerful. But also, if you are guided, all your weapons become assault. This is potentially amazing. It means you can move really fast because all your units essentially can advance, which means you're moving an extra possibly 6 inches, and still be able to shoot, still be able to do actions. It's really nice. There's also some really cool offensive stratagems in this. The Kayun is all about very defensive and waiting, but the Mont'ka is all about just doing as much damage as possible. For instance, combat debarkation. Opposite for the Kayun stratagem to jump in a transport and run away, this one allows when you get out of a transport to do more damage. The one I think I'm going to be running the most though, and the one I suspect we're going to see most at tournaments, although I haven't done enough testing to really suss that out, is the Retaliation Cadre. I love this. This detachment was built for my playstyle. Basically every single battlesuit in your army gets +1 strength if it's within 12 inches of the enemy, and +1 AP if it's within 6 inches. This is potentially beautiful. There's so much I could do with that. If you've watched this channel at all, if you know my playstyle, I like to get aggressive. I like to go really close and just pull off those high risk, high reward maneuvers, and this is that gameplay. Basically, you're taking your crisis suits, you're jumping as close as you can because you want to get all the bonuses, and that means, flamers that are normally strength 5, AP nothing, are suddenly strength 5, AP 1. And that doesn't even get into the fact that battle suits with flamers now have special abilities to give them extra bonuses. So, you attach Farsight to a unit of flamer suits, the new flamer suits, I'll get to that in a second, and suddenly you've got a strength 5 flamer that is AP 2 with +1 to wound. It's I can see so much potential with that. They're like, I'm melting Marines with that. I also really, really, really like one of the enhancements. It's the internal grenade rack. You put it on a commander suit, and it has the grenade keyword, so suddenly you can do the grenade stratagem. But also, when you fly over top of a unit, you get the ability, when you fly over a unit, to do mortal wounds on a 4-up with 6 dice. I can just imagine Cold Stars equipped with that, flying over a unit, doing that ability, grenading them, and then shooting them with a bunch of fusion blasters. Oh, it just sounds fun! The last detachment in the Codex, of course, is the Kroot Hunting Pack. This is the Kroot-only detachment. You can take other units in it. You don't have to just take Kroot. I could see play for wanting to take some broadsides, some long-range heavy firepower, hammerheads, that kind of thing within a Kroot detachment. But the only units that benefit from this detachment are going to be Kroot. All the stratagems, all the detachment is all based around Kroot. Kroot get a 5+ invulnerable save against shooting attacks and a 6-up invulnerable save against close combat attacks. This makes them kind of tanky, surprisingly tanky, especially if you take a 20-man blob of Kroot with one of the new shapers that can give them a feel no pain of a 6-up. So suddenly you're tanking shots on a 5 and then on a 6, and they have natural stealth, so -1 to hit. This means your 20-man blob of Kroot suddenly is not dying and can actually dish out some decent close combat attacks, or at very least just hold objectives. It gives you some very interesting play. The Kroot as a whole are the most interesting new addition to this Codex. They have a very unique playstyle. First of all, we've got the Rampagers, close combat Kroot. These do mortal wounds on the charge, and potentially with 3 of them, D3 for each one that's in combat. That's potentially 9 mortal wounds on the charge. And their attacks in close combat are no slouch either. So these guys have the potential to do some real damage. The biggest challenge is going to be getting them there. Only T6, 5 wounds, but they only move 7 inches. So, and no ability to advance and charge, which means you're gonna have to be really careful with these guys. When I first ran them, I kind of ran them as just run them at the board, try to hit you. But I think what they're going to excel at is staying in your lines and being the counter punch. When someone with a close combat army comes at you and charges you or gets close, then you charge at them. Kind of the 1-2 punch rather than the Mont'ka. They're the Caillou rather than the Mont'ka. They have a lot of really cool stratagems to allow you to do things like fall back and then charge back in. They have a reinforcement strategy. You can bring a whole group of Kroot back. And here's where it gets interesting. One of the new shapers, the War Shaper, has an ability to do a battle tactic for 0 command points to the unit that he's attached to. If I'm reading this correctly, the reinforcement, the join the hunt stratagem, allows you to bring back a Kroot unit that just got destroyed. If I'm reading this correctly, that War Shaper can do that ability for free. So basically you attach 2 War Shapers to 2 different units of 20 Kroot, and you're bringing back 40 Kroot for free throughout that game. That's a lot of Kroot to deal with. I think I played a test game with the Kroot, and I think I ended up bringing back, with that stratagem and the free stratagems, something like 70 bodies back to just overwhelm objectives. It was fun. To be honest, though, the Kroot are going to need it, because the Kroot are squishy. Even with all those invulnerable saves, even with the feel no pains, they are still squishy and they die quick. So you're going to need to be able to have those bodies just go at them. They are definitely a swarm army, and I think there's some real synergy in taking a Kroot detachment with some long-range heavy firepower from the Tau. That's one thing they lack. None of their stuff can really deal with vehicles or heavy stuff. They're going to be able to tie up stuff. They're going to be able to they can deal with Marines in close combat with enough bodies, but it's the shooting. They don't have enough shooting. So I think a really cool army would be a Kroot detachment, but be about 1,500 points, and some hammerheads, some broadsides, some damage dealing at range. The biggest thing we need to talk about that most people are going to gravitate towards is the big changes to crisis suits. Crisis suits in previous editions, and actually throughout all the editions, have been this jackknife, this Swiss Army knife of tools. Basically with a bunch of hard points, and you attached as many different kinds of combinations of weapons and support systems to outfit them for whatever role you want. In previous editions of the game, that meant you could have a Crisis Suit unit that was really cheap on points if you just attach a couple cheap flamers to them, or you could have a Crisis Suit unit that was really expensive when you attached a whole bunch of fusion blasters or cyclic ion blasters to them. In 10th edition, they went away with individual points for weapons. Debatable option. I will admit I do enjoy making lists faster, but it does mean some of the granularity of the choice is gone, because if there's no point value for the weapons, it just means you're always going to take the best one, which previously has been cyclic ion blasters. Pretty good gun, decent range, does a lot of damage. They're gone! In this codex, they are completely gone. You cannot take them anymore, except for on commanders. Makes sense for the game. Makes a lot of sense for the game. They were becoming ubiquitous. They were becoming annoying to deal with. They were too strong. It also meant you had to point the Crisis Suits at such a point level to assume that everyone was taking them, which meant that taking anything else like flamers or burst cannons or plasma guns was kind of useless, because you were basically paying a bunch of extra points for these Crisis Suits for taking unoptimal weapons. So how they solved that in 10th edition was to split up the Crisis Suits into 3 different data sheets. So you have 3 different flavors of Crisis Suits. This is going to be controversial. My opinion, I kind of love it. It's a very elegant way of doing it in 10th edition if they want to keep this point style. You still have the flexibility of equipping your Crisis Suits as you want, especially if you've magnetized them, because the Crisis Suit miniature is still the same as all these 3 data sheets. It's just what they're equipped with is different. And if you aren't magnetizing your miniatures for Tau Crisis Suits, I highly recommend it. It is the best way to do it. And it's not too expensive and doesn't take that much work. Basically, we have a fusion blaster variant, we have a plasma and missile pod variant, and we have a kind of close quarters variant with flamers and burst cannons. Each of these can be kitted out with 2 weapons. Only 2 weapons. Previously it could be 3, sometimes editions it could be 4. This edition, 2 weapons. That's how it originally started, so they've gone back to that. It limits it, but it does allow them to be considerably cheaper on points. The Starscythe, this new flamer burst cannon variant, you can either take 2 flamers or 2 burst cannons. You still get to choose. I think is going to be my favorite one. 2 flamers on each suit, that if I take in the Retaliation Cadre and attach Farsight to them, I'm getting bonuses, because each one of these data sheets has different bonuses. That is one thing that does allow them to really specialize. This is what's cool about this splitting up. Each one of these data sheets has bonuses to specialize these Crisis Suits in a certain area. The Starscythe, the Flamer Burst Cannon variant, gets an additional AP against infantry, which means suddenly your Flamers are AP 1. If you take that in a Retaliation Cadre and you get within 6 inches, suddenly you're AP 2, Strength 5. If you join Farsight to that unit, suddenly you're AP 2, Strength 5 with +1 to wound. Take that, Space Marines. Take that, Space Marine Terminators. Now imagine combining that with, say, a Cold Star Commander with a Grenade Gauntlet. Suddenly you're flying over units, doing grenades, doing the grenade stratagem, flaming, and then the really cool stratagem to fire and fade for 1 CP. So good. Suddenly you're doing a bunch of damage that they can't really stop, and then running away, so they gotta come chase you. It's so quintessential Tau, I love it. Then we have the Fireknife battlesuit. This is basically the long-range battleshoot option. So your choices are between plasma or missile pods. 2 plasma, 2 missile pods, or 1 of each. I will likely do 1 of each. I kind of like the Fireknife. The long range is actually surprisingly powerful. The Fireknives get range, but they also get reliability. They automatically get a built-in reroll to hit against anything that's not damaged. So perfect for those alpha strikes, or even for those beta strikes to target those 1 units. It's really, really good. They also ignore all modifiers. Perfect for firing at those sneaky stealth units that make it so hard to hit. Guide these guys in the Mont'ka detachment, suddenly getting lethal hits in the first turn with missile pods from across the table. They're doing multiple damage, or the plasma, 3 damage each. Could get good. Then lastly, we have the Sunforge battlesuits. I like these guys a lot as well. These are fusion blasters. They're also the only one that has shield generators. So they're more tanky. But what they get is reroll the wound roll and reroll the damage roll against vehicles and monsters. The amount of times I've rolled a 1 on that Melta chart, and if you combine that in the Retaliation Cadre with a stratagem to allow them to come within 3 inches, suddenly you've got a unit that can come within Melta range and do really good damage, like consistent damage. That's been one of the challenges with Tau with their fusion blasters, is that they haven't been consistent. Now I really feel like I can take a unit of 3, equip them all with fusion blasters, make them a Sunforge battlesuit, and get them in there. After the GW preview, I'm hearing a lot of people say that, oh, now we don't have the flexibility, it's not, the Crisis suit isn't the same anymore. I mean, sure, but at the same time, this is still the same Crisis in just 3 different patterns. You basically can equip them as you want, and if you have magnets, you can equip them however you want. And yes, there are something like 67 different combinations of all the different Tau weapons that you could do right now, but to be honest, ask yourself honestly, were you really running all 67? Or were you really just choosing between a couple? And how many of you were really just running Cyclical blasters? Now we have real choice between them, and if these are pointed accurately, they're going to be very effective. Now the points in the book might be accurate, and if they are, I think these are pointed very competitively, specifically the Starscythe. I think those are going to be really good. I can see me running 3 of them. Other people are going to say like, oh, I can't believe they come up with all these fancy weird names for this just to like make you buy more models. Well, to be honest, these names are actually chosen from Tau history. In the very first Tau Codex, right around that time, they released a White Dwarf article. It was a tactics article on Tau. It was really good, a lot of fun, but they codified and in lore some standard loadouts that the Tau often used, and they named them. Named them Fireknife, Plasma Missile Pods. So these names are actually from the Tau history. There's actually a lot of lore behind it, and Tau aficionados from way back when would use these saying, hey, I recommend you run a Fireknife. I'm totally on board with these. I think they're going to be really powerful. I'm actually really excited to figure out some ways to really cool convert these miniatures and find some maybe ways to maybe uniquely tell them apart aside from just the weapons. Maybe some extra fins or some sensor vanes or cool doodads, because I think we can have some real fun with it. The Starscythe especially, maybe some flame motifs or something like that. I can imagine those guys being more like hotshot pilots that are really like risky and like, you know, decorate their battlesuits with kill counts and stuff like that. We can have some all sorts of fun with this, so I'm excited. The rest of the Codex, surprisingly, is very, very similar. If you're used to the Index, you won't find a lot of differences. Most of the stuff is almost identical. There was one standout that was quite interesting. Skyray's weapons are now twin-linked. Skyray already was a really good chassis. Suddenly, all its weapons are twin-linked. I don't think that thing's missing. That hit roll is like a why bother roll. Another really interesting unit to note from this Codex that I think I'm excited to use more of is the Yavara. Previously in the Index, the Yavara was not great, but suddenly, if you take it in the Retaliation Cadre, all the battlesuits get +1 strength and +1 AP. Its flamer is really good. I've annihilated whole units with it. It's fantastic. And as of the recording of this video, none of the Forge World models have gone into Legends, so we're still clear to use the Yavara, the Arvarna, the Tetra. All those things are still valid and great, and I think we can expect some great things from the Tau. I think it's time the Empire strikes back. Appreciate you watching. Thank you for supporting us. Thank you for watching. We have a couple Tau games coming up very soon using both an all Kroot army and the Retaliation Cadre. You can expect to find those very soon. If they're not out already, please watch them. Please tell us what you think. I'm excited to play some Tau games. In fact, coming up the first week of April, we're going to be running a Tau marathon live stream. I'm going to go through every single Tau detachment, and I'm going to be putting them through the ringers and asking the studio to bring your best shot, see if I can take them, and I'm going to see if the Tau can emerge victorious through the ashes. Thank you for watching, thank you for supporting, and until we see you next time, play on.